What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to the channel. Hope all's good wherever you are. In this video, we got Piers Morgan interviewing RFK. They're talking the coup that just happened to Joe Biden. They talk to Secret Service. They talk Kamala Harris. Let's get into it.
Joe Biden, the Democrat nomination, Robert F. Kennedy Jr. Robert, great to have you back on Uncensored again. It feels like every time I interview you, something quite extraordinary has just happened. And we talk about the latest development in what was supposed to be a really dull race, but has turned into this electrifying kind of soap opera, albeit with very serious consequences. Let me just first of all talk about Joe Biden's resignation with you. Should he stand down as president? Is it not incongruous for him to say, I'm not fit to continue in the race, which ends in November, but I am fit to continue as president until January?
Yeah, I don't think those were the words that he used. I think what he is saying is that he needs all of his energy to focus on governing the country, and that's why he's withdrawing from the race. So I'm not going to comment on it one way or the other, but I think the die is cast.
But would it not make it easier for Kamala Harris or whoever the nominee ends up being for the Democrats? Would it not make their job easier if they were able, in her case, I mean uniquely, because she'd be doing what it applied to, if she was able to become president, would that not strengthen her position and improve her chances of winning?
It will definitely strengthen her position within the party. I'm not sure that that's the best thing for the Democratic Party. I would think that the best thing for the party is to actually have a democratic process that, where people are either using ranked choice voting, which actually is democratic, or using polls, national polls, where you say who's the most likely Democrat to beat Donald Trump, and actually really opening up the convention to a vote. I think what they're going to do is they're going to have kind of a Potemkin village of democracy. They're going to have a kind of a faux democracy where they pretend it's a democratic process, but Kamala is at the end of every, at the end of every pathway. So I think it's really going to be about picking her vice president, that, there's going to probably be a little bit of democracy there. But as you know, Piers, I'm a lifelong Democrat. I had to get out of the party because they would not have a democratic process. They use, the DNC, which is the elite, 400 elite members of the Democratic Party, decided who was going to be president, which is President Biden. And they rigged the rules to make sure that there was no democracy. And I grew up in a Democratic Party that was fighting to make sure every American got the right to vote for anybody that they wanted to vote for. And today's Democratic Party is just the opposite. It's fighting and spending hundreds of millions of dollars to make sure that, to use the courts, to use the denial of Secret Service protection, to use all of these other mechanisms of power to make sure that President Biden doesn't have anybody to run against, and now Vice President Kamala Harris won't have to really deal with an authentic democracy.
What do you think happens here? We've got 4 months until the election. Do you think it's almost certain that Kamala Harris will be the nominee? Or could you see it genuinely ending up being an open brokered convention where it could be one of any number of people?
Yeah, I think it's better for the party and the country if they actually have an open convention. But having seen what I've seen from the Democratic Party, I don't think that is a likely outcome. But I think it would be better for our country. I don't know. I think, I saw what happened during the primaries, where the people who were running, like Dean Phillips and myself and Marianne Williamson, were just shut out. We were told those primaries are not being held anymore. We were told, they passed a law they passed a rule within the Democratic Party that after they saw me campaigning very, very effectively in New Hampshire, they passed a rule that any candidate who steps foot into the state of New Hampshire, that all of their votes will go for President Biden. So those were the audacity of the kind of new rules they were adopting to make sure that democracy did not function. And I suspect that's the same thing that's going to happen with Kamala now.
I mean, what's interesting, and I think this is probably supportive of your view of what you just expressed, a lot of the front runners have already endorsed her publicly. So even if it went to an open convention, it wouldn't include the likes of Gavin Newsom, Gretchen Whitmer, and others, because they've already said they're backing Kamala Harris. So they've kind of talked themselves out of the race.
Yeah, and I think Kamala has a lot of vulnerabilities we're gonna hear more and more about over the next 104 days. Oh, Kamala, for one thing, Piers, Kamala was kind of the concealer in chief. She was talking every day, according to her own recounting, to President Biden, and she was the one who was coming out onto the podium and saying there was nothing wrong, that there was no problem. And so clearly she was either she was blind to the kind of thing that we all saw during the debate, or she was trying to protect her own career by putting the country's interests secondary. And I think that that's something that the Trump campaign is going to have billions of dollars to put that story on TV. Vice President Harris was also one of the public officials in California who created these policies that made California 49th in terms of education outcome. Number one, in terms of homelessness, California, 50% of the homeless people in our country live in California. That's not a good record to run on. And I think she has a lot of other vulnerabilities that, that we're going to hear more and more about, and that essentially are going to make her unelectable.
Here's one of the big problems for me with Kamala Harris. One of the big ones. There's many. But over the last, what do we want to call it? We want to call it 18 months? We want to call it 2 years? All of us watching the clown show that is Biden-Harris has known that Joe Biden is not fit for office. All the signs are there. Where was him face planting everywhere, falling down the stairs, falling off his bike, the gibberish that he was talking, forgetting his speech, wandering off the stage, shaking hands with ghosts. But all of them, especially Kamala Harris, would tell you that, hey, Biden, sharp as a tack. He's not mentally ill. He's fit for office. Nobody's better than Biden. And now we have Biden himself, who nobody's seen him since he, posted that letter, I don't think, back in his cave. He himself has come out and said that pretty much he's not fit for office. And what we have here is a rare time in my life anyway, that we have an election going on with a man, in this case Trump, who was already president for 4 years. So when you're saying all these lies about the guy, and you're telling us that Biden is fit for office, we see it with our own eyes. Biden is not fit for office. I don't even think he would qualify for a Walmart greeter job at the moment. But when they lie about Trump, it's like, how can you lie about this? We know the policies. He was there for 4 years. And yet they gaslight us over and over again, the Democrats, the media. You can't trust any of them because they lied unapologetically to the public's face. Kamala Harris also, and now we're supposed to accept the fact that this person is trustworthy. It's been a crazy time if you think about it, right? The past 2 weeks, we've lived through, and this is purely my opinion, an attempted coup in the killing of Donald Trump, an actual coup with Joe Biden. I mean, even the lady, that Kim Chiel, who I made a video about, which should post after this one, testified in front of Congress today, the head of the Secret Service, and said that the assassination on Trump was the most significant operational failure of the Secret Service in decades. And let me say one thing, the fact that she's still employed. If you have the most significant operational failure in the Secret Service in decades, or if you don't get fired for that, what do you get fired for? Trump's going to have to get his own security. This, in my opinion, is what you would call orchestrated negligence, right? How does a 20-something-year-old kid with no social media presence, no camouflage, climb on a roof with cameras everywhere, people pointing at him, mentioning that he was there for about, a minute and, 45 seconds, People saying, hey, this guy's on the roof, this guy's on the roof. And how does a 20-year-old kid with an AR-15 get on a rooftop literally 150 yards away from the president? They're gaslighting us and they're lying to us. Let's get back to the clip.
Robert, the last time you were on Uncensored, we had a pretty passionate conversation about the fact you were not getting Secret Service protection. You finally were given that protection, but obviously only after Donald Trump had been shot at a rally. First of all, your response to getting it, albeit belatedly.
I'm very grateful for having it. The Secret Service detail I have is very professional. I think they've made me and my family feel very, very safe. And I'm very, very grateful to the Secret Service for finally. And I think I told you at one point, Piers, we actually had repeated conversations with the Secret Service, and from the beginning, the Secret Service wanted to give us protection. Yes. And they were being denied that, and they expected us to, and they were being denied that by the White House. So they were very surprised that the White House, or that our, DHS, Secretary Mayorkas, was not allowing. They found that they did their own assessment of me that found that I was at, quote, elevated risk. They wanted to give it to us from the beginning, and the detail that we've got is really wonderful. I think, what's troubling to me, and I don't want to make this about me, but we've seen this weaponization of the federal agencies, of the enforcement agencies, including the CIA, the CIA, FBI, and even the NIH and the CDC. In it being weaponized for political purposes. And, I just won this lawsuit against the Biden administration, Kennedy versus Biden. I just won an injunction against the Biden administration using the FBI and the CIA and NIH and CDC to censor me, to stop the censorship. But we've seen it across the board against President Trump, against other rivals of the president, in a way that I think should be very, very disturbing to the American people. Piers, when my father took over the Justice Department in 1961 for his brother, who was then president, he had a meeting the first week where he called all the branch chiefs and all the division chairs, and he said to them, the one rule in this Justice Department is that no, we never politicize enforcement, that we never ask the question about a defendant, are they Democrat or Republican? We have a responsibility for making sure that the American people believe that in our country, justice is blind, that the enforcement agencies of our country are neutral politically, and that's the only way to maintain faith of the American public in these critical institutions of democracy. So, and I think President Biden really dropped the ball on that. I think, President Trump did too. When he was running, he was talking about, locking up Hillary Clinton and appointing a special prosecutor to do that. And, it's paradoxical that when he got that, now that he's on the outside, he saw those federal agencies weaponized against him in ways that I think the entire country witnessed. But it's not good for our country. We look like a banana republic.
Yeah, completely. And when you saw what happened to Donald Trump a week ago and how close he came to being assassinated, and the full scale of how the Secret Service had dropped the ball in protecting him with this young kid with a rifle on a rooftop just 150 yards or so from where Trump was standing. Do you think that the Director of the Secret Service, Kim Cheetle, who's currently testifying on Congress, should she have already resigned?
I have a lot of questions about how about the coverage, and we're hearing now. We heard this actually from President Trump. I spoke with President Trump soon after, the evening of his shooting, and we talked about the fact that the Secret Service, and he was very complimentary of his Secret Service detail and their bravery in getting up onto the stand very, very quickly and moving him off and protecting him. But even he had some questions. People on his staff told us that they had asked for enhanced Secret Service protection and that the DHS had denied it to them. And they were comparing their situation to my situation. So I think those questions need to be answered by somebody. I wouldn't necessarily blame the Secret Service till I know more. But I think somebody bungled it. Somebody, obviously, it's obvious from the outcome that there was something going on here that, Americans really need to know more about. I'll say this. I think President Trump's first reaction to the shooting, first his bravery on the podium, and then after that, at least the noises he made about unifying the country, I was very touched by that and very hopeful about that. And I don't think it's necessarily turned out that way, but I think at first, and the first 10 minutes of his convention speech were very conciliatory. And I think that's what our country needs now. It needs to be unified. When my uncle was shot, Piers, in 1963, when he landed in Dallas that day, there were posters all over the city that said, and in fact, advertisements in the leading newspapers in the city that had a picture of my uncle and a wanted poster, wanted dead or alive. And that was an emblem of this, of this polarization that had come out of the civil rights movement, particularly at that time, and the anger at my uncle in some of the southern states, and his shooting in many ways was a product of that boiling anger. But after he died, our country came together in an amazing way. And, he'd been trying to get the Civil Rights Act passed, the Voting Rights Act. And immediately after his death, as a gesture to his memorial, as a memorial gesture to him, Congress, both houses of Congress got together and passed the Voting Rights Act. And, I really would have liked to see that kind of unity. And our country became a true constitutional democracy for the first time in its history as a result of his murder. So, our job on earth is to bring order out of chaos and turn bad things into good things. And I was hoping that the same thing would happen for our country after President Trump's, after the attempted assassination. And, I think he gave us some reason for hope at the outset. I'm not sure if it's holding.
And I spoke to him on Saturday night, and he was remarkably sanguine about what had happened to him. And I was congratulating him that he'd gone back out within a week and was back on another stage at another rally, showing no signs of being put off at all by what had happened to him, which was extraordinary. But he also expressed a hope in that phone call that Joe Biden would stay in the race as long as possible. If it does end up being Kamala Harris v. Donald Trump come November, who wins?
I never make predictions. I stopped making predictions in 2016 after I said that President Trump could never be elected president. So I've tried to be disciplined about not making predictions, and also I really try not to spin stuff. So I'm not going to make that prediction, but I think that right now it seems like it's President Trump's race to lose, but he also is capable of doing that. So I think that 100 days is our light years from now, and so many things could change between now and then, and so I wouldn't make that prediction.
The one prediction I will make is that unpredictable things will happen, because it's turned into the most unpredictable race in history. Robert F. Kennedy Jr., it's brilliant to have you back on. Please come back again when inevitably something more outlandish occurs. God knows what it will be, but I think we can pretty well be certain something will. And I appreciate you, as always, you coming on. Thank you very much.
Yeah, the fact that this man didn't get any Secret Service detail is still baffling. Like, sure, he was not one of the top two candidates, but he's still running for president. He's still very famous, very popular, with a family that not necessarily doesn't necessarily have the best history with assassinations and assassination attempts. I like RFK. Yeah, he's got some kooky things about reparations, but I like the guy. That doesn't mean I would vote for the man. Not conservative enough for my liking at all. But at the same time, if he was a Democrat, that's a way better option. And if they would have had an actual debate, in my humble opinion, they would be way better off with RFK there than Biden or than with Kamala Harris. But these days, the left is so left. I don't know. Maybe he's not enough of an ideologue. But I do like the guy. He seems like a good human being, which I can't say the same when I hear Kamala Harris or Joe Biden speak. You just get that feeling. That'll be it for this video. Hope you all enjoyed it. If you did, please smash that thumbs up button. Consider subscribing to the channel. Help it grow. And I'll catch you all in the next video. Peace out, everybody.